Joe Adorno here, and we are at part two of my story about how I became the first single gay man in the state of Florida to legally adopt a child out of foster care. Now, last when we left, I was sitting in my supervisor's office, and he was like, we need to go to HR. And I was like, HR isn't gonna do anything to defend me. So we ended up having a meeting, probably within a week or so, with HR. And she came into the office, and I was ready. I felt like I kind of did my research, and she was like, well, what's the problem? And I was like, the problem is I want to adopt this kid. This kid wants to be adopted by me. And I was told no. I was like, I'm a case manager, and part of my job description is to find safety, permanency, and stability for every kid on my case. And I believe I found it with this kid with me. And so she sat there and she was like, okay, well, if this is what you want to pursue, then, we have to pursue adoption for this kid. And I was like, cool, because his goal's been changed, and that's what Child Legal Services said. I felt like I won, and I was like, cool, we're gonna pursue this. So I'm back in my office, and I'm going to work on this case, and I was like, all right, so I guess I have to do an adoption home study or something. And I was like, do I do this home study on myself? I don't get it. I was like, I've done it before for other people, but not for myself. Somebody came to me higher up and said, you can't actively pursue an adoption for yourself on your own case. Loophole, you can't adopt a kid from your own case. That's a conflict of interest. And I was like, what's the conflict? What's the conflict? That I'm gonna be biased on the home study, that I'm gonna approve it, that me working for the department with a cleared background check is not enough? And so anyways, she was like, well, we're gonna have to staff the case, and we're gonna have to take it out of your name, and we're gonna have to give it to somebody else so that they can work the case. Okay, I guess that makes sense. Sure. A month later, that case is still in my name. A month later, I can't transfer it. It was still in my name. And so I was like, when is this gonna happen? It took them 3 months to transfer that case out of my name. And within that process of 3 months, I remember being called into another supervisor's office with the vice president, with the director, and they said, Joe, are you gonna parade down the street that you're gay and have camera crews in the courtroom? Because we can't have that. And I was like, why can't you have that? What if I did? What if I didn't? And they're like, we don't want this to be a media spectacle. Can you just adopt him quietly? Yeah, I don't care. I just want to adopt this kid. That's really all that matters. Well, so then, okay, fine. So that was meeting number one. I had a second meeting where they pulled me into the office, and they were like, is this about the money? And I said, well, what money? And they were like, well, if you adopt a kid out of foster care, you get a stipend monthly until the kid turns 18. The kid is currently 17 years old. What am I gonna get? 6 months of a stipend? What 9 months of a stipend? What am I gonna get? And so is that enough for me to live off of? What is it, $20 a day, $600 a month, something like that? So I was like, well, no, it's not about the money. And she said, are you willing to sign that you will not take any money for this adoption? Okay, cool. Sure, I guess so. If that's what I need to prove that I'm serious about it, sure. I didn't know that was illegal. To this day, I have never received the adoption stipend that I was entitled to get when I adopted him. I will put that out there. So, I signed these papers. Sure, I wouldn't accept it. Can we start moving forward with this adoption? Because it had been 3 months that this case was still in my name. And I felt like we wasted 90 days. So, and I'm still seeing this kid. And so they transferred the case to another worker in the agency. And so I remember a couple weeks later, I'm like, hey, buddy, when are you gonna do a home study on my house? I was renting an apartment with a roommate, and her and I at the time were like, well, let's just get a 3-bedroom townhome. That'll be perfect. And I was like, yes, because it would be so nice to have someone help me with the bills, because I'm still in my 20s. What am I doing? Adopting a full-grown teenager in high school. And she goes, he was like, they told me not to. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I'm supposed to see him, and I'm supposed to say that the goal is adoption, but I was told not to do a home study. Let me tell you how, because the case was no longer in my name, I showed up to court for his court hearing. And I remember telling him, I said, you need to speak up and tell the judge you want to be adopted. And so he was there in open court, and he was bold. He's still bold. I love him to death. He is, if something needs to be said, he will stand up and say it. And I love him for that. And he was in court and he was like, I want to be adopted. And the judge was like, I see that you want to be adopted. Where are we with this? And the one attorney on the case, Tony Richardson, rest in peace, was like, yeah, where are we with this? Anyway, he's talking to the boy, to the teenager, and he was like, do you want to be adopted by who? And he was like, Mr. Joe. And so I stood up, and he was like, I mean, I'd known the judge because I had been working for like 3 years for the department. So he was like, so you want to adopt this kid? And I was like, I do. So we ended up having a conversation with the kid, and he brought the kid into his chambers and they talked privately. And so he came back and he was like, okay, we're going to pursue this adoption. And so it wasn't until then the guardian ad litem, and those are supposed to be the voice of the child in court. They are a specialized attorney branch that kind of represents the best interest of the child. That doesn't necessarily mean they're representing the child's interest, but their goal is to represent the best interest of the child. The one guardian ad litem, she said, you know what, Joe, I have been working with this kid for years. I want to watch you two interact. And I was like, cool. So like, you want to grab lunch with us over the weekend or something like that? And so I picked him up over the weekend and we went to go get like pizza and hang out, and we just interacted and had a good time. And afterwards she was like, okay, I'm sold. I will support pursuing adoption with this. Cool, thank you. But it didn't matter because the case management still had to move forward with the case, and they're the ones who oversee the case for the state. Because I was in the same office and I kept almost every day, I was like, hey, what are you doing with the case? Hey, when are you coming to see me? They straight up brought me into a meeting and they said, all right, before we do this home study, we are aware that you have a roommate. Yes? Well, I don't think it's a good idea for you to adopt a kid if you have a roommate, because he might get confused of who the parent is. No, that's not what's happening. I have a roommate. And they're like, well, can't you just get your own 2-bedroom apartment and then we can start with this adoption? And I said, is that what it's gonna take for you guys to get started? Yes, so if you're gonna get your own apartment, then we'll wait until you get an apartment to get the home study. Okay, cool. I got an apartment in April of 2011. We had already been pursuing this since September. So I got an apartment by myself and it was tough. It was tough affording a 2-bedroom apartment by yourself. You guys know. And so I remember they started to do a small little home study. And I remember again, the vice president comes to me and says, don't you have another job? Like you teach hip hop and stuff like that, right? And I was like, yes. And she was like, well, I need those pay stubs. And I was like, well, why? She goes, because we're gonna do a home study of your income. And I was like, well, you have my paychecks from this job. And she goes, unfortunately, I don't think you make enough to qualify to adopt a child. And I think she thought she was gonna have one of those like gotcha moments. And I was like, that seems like a you problem, not a me problem. And I said, I would love to let the media know that you guys don't pay me enough to adopt and support a child. So no, you have my full-time paycheck and you can use that as the home study. And if I don't qualify to adopt a child based on my full-time paycheck, seems like your issue. They ended up transferring that case to a whole nother agency because they said I kept getting involved. Stick around for part 3.